The the poem "Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening" by Robert Frost has a unique rhyme scheme. It's called a chain rhyme, meaning the inferior rhyme in the first stanza becomes the maximum or the more powerful rhyme in the second stanza. Meaning, if you look at the poem, the words know, though, and snow all rhyme together, but here sticks out. Then in the second stanza, here rhymes with queer, near, and year. You don't need to really know what a chain rhyme is, but just remember that Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening is probably the most famous poem. It's one of the very few poems to incorporate this. When you think of Robert Frost, he was the patron saint of New England, meaning nearly everything the guy wrote was about living in New England 100 years ago. It was cold. The people were stubborn and stoic. I mean, you think about it. They were the grandchildren of the Puritans. They dressed like Abe Lincoln's father's boss. They didn't have to have fun. In fact, any sort of frivolity was equated with sin. So they were serious people. They had sticks up their asses. And even though on the surface, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening looks a bit like a Hallmark card or a Currier and Ives print in your granny's house, there's a lot of critics out there who think it's actually a little darker than it seems on the surface. There's a lot of people that think it's about a guy who's considering killing himself in the woods, but later gets rid of that thought. He shoves it away because he's got obligations. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So again, you got that weird chain rhyme going on, where two lines rhyme, there's a break, and then the fourth line rhymes with the first and the second. It's confusing with me talking about it right now, but if you look at the actual print I have of this poem on D2L, you'll understand it a little better. It's just a unique thing. It's a trivia question. It's a Jeopardy question. But yeah, he knows the guy whose woods he's in because he knows everybody. It's a small little town, probably in Vermont or New Hampshire, 100 years ago. And he knows this guy's going to be drinking a tankard of cider at the tavern or in his house. He's not going to be out on the farm. So he knows he's all by himself watching this beautiful scene unfold. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. So the horse is an automaton. It knows its path. It knows it goes to market. It knows it goes to another farm, and it knows when it stops and eats when it gets back home. So any kind of weird stop that's out of the ordinary throws it into a bit of a frenzy. It's quizzical about this. And you'll notice the last line of that stanza I just read, the darkest evening of the year. I mean, just a hint, a tiny little hint of something ominous, evil, perhaps. I mean, even thinking about it on the calendar year, that's what, December 22nd or 23rd, that shortest day, the darkest, longest evening of the year is the shortest day. It's right before Christmas, which when you're a little kid, Christmas is awesome because you get free stuff, but when you're an adult, it sucks because you got to pay for everything and there's pressure. It's not the same kind of fun, and suicides do tend to spike during the holiday season. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there's some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. So yeah, the horse is befuddled as to why they stopped, and he shakes his little bells on his harness, but it's complete and absolute. He's almost like he's in a vacuum. It's just snowfall. You can actually hear the snow falling on the ground, and you gotta admit, I mean, without seeing it, just seeing it described in words, it probably is gorgeous. It's probably a beautiful thing. So if he was indeed thinking about killing himself, or just vanishing completely, he gives it up. that last stanza, we see that he completely disavows this idea if he indeed did have it. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. I saw on Jeopardy a couple weeks ago, and miles to go before I sleep, that famous couplet was the final Jeopardy answer. And I think it means two different things. It's the same line repeated identically twice, but I think it means, one, literal miles. I got 8 miles to get back to my crib and put the horse away and sit in front of the fire and dry my boots. But I think the other one is my wedding vows. I've got kids who are expecting Christmas presents. I got bills to pay. I got a mortgage to pay. I've got animals to feed and tend to. I think those are the promises that he's got to keep. So he shakes away this reverie, whether it's thinking about killing himself or whether it's just chilling and relaxing and enjoying the evening. He's like, I got business to do. I got to get back to it. And he does. That's staunch, like I said, stoic Puritan. Now, the other poem by Robert Frost, it doesn't hide. It's a grim poem. It's called Out Out. And you'll notice that Out Out is actually in quotes, singular quotes, because it is a line. It's an allusion to a line from Macbeth regarding out out brief candle, meaning life is very short. And the way the kid's death in this poem is described is very much like a slow motion video of watching a candle being blown out. It's there, it wavers, and then it's flat out gone, just in 3 quick strokes, basically. There's onomatopoeia in this poem. You know, the word buzzsaw. There's a lot of, I don't even want to say personification, but this saw is like Christine, the demonic 1963 Plymouth Fury from the Stephen King movie. It's possessed, it seems. It's like a junkyard dog. It's pissed, this buzzsaw. It's the antagonist in this poem. The buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood, sweet-scented stuff when the breeze drew across it. And from there, those that lifted eyes could count 5 mountain ranges, one behind the other, under the sunset far into Vermont. So, he's saying, if, for some weird reason, you decided to look that way, you could see 5 mountain ranges with the sun going down behind it, which would be hard to pass up. I mean, regardless of who you are, it's got to be gorgeous. It's got to be Mother Nature at her most vibrant. But these guys, there's a damn good chance they don't look up to see this sunset behind this 5 mountain ranges, because we don't have time to fool around. We got work to do, boys. It's not part of their fiber. It's not part of their ethos. And the saw snarled and rattled as it ran light or had to bear a load. Again, this thing's possessed. Whether it's just cutting wood or whether it's just running without wood in front of it, something's off with it. And it's like Chekhov's gun, man. You see a gun hanging on a wall in the first act of a play. Somebody's going to get shot with that gun before the play's over. It's a common trope. And I think this is Chekhov's gun, this buzzsaw. And nothing happened. Day was all but done. Call it a day. I wish they might have said to please the boy by giving him the half hour that a boy counts so much when saved from work. The poet saying, man, I wish we'd stopped right then and there, because none of this crap would have happened, and everybody would have gone home happy. The kid could have thrown the ball to his dog and chilled for a few minutes with a book under a tree before the sun was finally down. But it didn't happen that way. His sister stood beside him in her apron to tell them supper. At the word, the saw, as if to prove saws knew what supper meant, leaped out at the boy's hand, or seemed to leap. He must have given the hand. However it was, neither refused the meeting. But the hand. And you'll notice there's an exclamation point behind "but the hand." Like, it's screwed. It's either completely gone, or it's so mangled that it'll never be. I mean, we're talking 1915 Vermont here. They don't have microsurgery. They don't have helicopters. If it's gone, it's gone. And I like the way that the saw, even though supper's being called for the men and the boys who were working, the saw gets its supper. It dives right in. And you'll notice too, it's whenever something tragic or horrific happens like this, you never really know exactly the details. Things get jumbled up in your mind, like a car crash. You might forget completely which lane you were in when you're describing it later. And that's what he's talking about. He doesn't remember the hand or the saw. It doesn't matter. Neither one refused the meeting, Frost says. The boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh as he swung toward them, holding up the hand, half in appeal, but half as to keep the life from spilling. The rueful laugh, I mean, I guess it's shock. He just, he makes this little noise. And just, there's something visceral, I guess, to hold the hand up like this so the blood doesn't just drain completely out of your body and you bleed out. But part of it's him holding it up going, look everybody, look what just happened to me. You know. He didn't know how to react. Then the boy saw all. Since he was old enough to know, big boy doing a man's work, though a child at heart, he saw all spoiled. I guess he knows that he's in trouble. I don't know if he knows he's going to be dead in a few seconds or a few minutes, but he knows that he's going to be a burden to his kinfolk and to his neighbors. I mean, these people pitch in and build barns together, and they did not have the same sort of prostheses that people have today, prosthetics rather, that are beautiful. I mean, they're scientifically advanced. They're fantastic. God forbid anybody ever has to get one, but back in these days, it was a stump, a hook, maybe a rubber hand for a church wedding, you know, to slip over the stump, basically. He would have been an outcast in regards to his people. Don't let him cut my hand off. The doctor, when he comes, don't let him, sister. So. But the hand was already gone. That one word sentence, so, meaning, man, it's too late, dude. You're screwed. The hand's completely, it's gone. In fact, he says, but the hand was gone already. The doctor put him in the dark of ether. He lay and puffed his lips out with his breath, and then the watcher at his pulse took fright. No one believed. They listened at his heart. Little, less, nothing. And that ended it. So, again, ether. The doctor pouring it as he's running from the town on a rag, probably. Not metering it out. Meeting it out. And maybe loss of blood, shock, and an overdose. Too much ether is what takes the kid out. Is what kills him. Who knows? I mean, it's a violent thing that happens to have a limb taken off like that. But I love, as brutal as it is, I love that description, little, less, nothing. Because it is like, if you were to videotape a candle being blown out in slow motion, you'd see it gone. And that's about how long it takes for this kid to expire, this young man. And the last two lines of this thing, they're more brutal than the rest of it. No more to build on there, and they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. Meaning, come on, boys, let's put all the tools away. We got work to do. We'll go to his funeral on Wednesday, but we're still alive. Let's keep working. No emotion. They're like automatons. They're almost like robots in a way. You know? They can't even express any emotion because it might signify weakness or something like that. And that's that Puritan work ethic you read about when you hear about the Pilgrims and their kin. Those people that did settle this, and you had to be a hard ass to settle New England back in those days. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fun. So those last two lines are what the poem's about, the people that live up there. Not as much about the death of the young man, but about the reaction of his friends and family and neighbors. They kind of shake their heads and carry on. Now, the next poem we're going to do is Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. If you look at the photograph of Hayden I have on D2L, his glasses, good God, look how thick they are, man. It's like what you would wear going into Chernobyl. They're like blast glasses. This is a short little poem, and it utilizes something, synesthesia is what it's called. It's actually a medical condition where you experience different senses through other senses, I guess. Like, you might see colors as numbers, for instance, or smells. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's. I know some people that have experienced it and have it. But in poetry as a device, it's when you use one sense to describe another sense. And he talks about the cold in the first stanza as being blue-black, like a bruise. So he's using color to describe temperature, something tactile. Like Digging from Seamus Haney that we did a couple days ago. It's a poem about remembering. It's a poem about, I think it's a poem about regret too. I think this guy's regretting that he did not give his dad enough thanks when he was a little boy. So I'll read it. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blazed. No one ever thanked him. I think one of the key words is too, meaning the old man gets up every day, but Sunday, hypothetically, the one day he could lay in bed and relax, he gets up early to crank the fire, and as we find out later, to shine some shoes so the kids look good in church and they're warm enough when they get dressed. Blue-black, of course, almost one word rammed into each other. Weekday weather, there's a little bit of alliteration going on, but that last line, no one ever thanked him. Again, he's like, looking back as a 40, 45-year-old man to when he was 10 or 12, thinking, you take that stuff for granted. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. I don't know what that means, chronic angers. I don't know if it means it's an old house and it squeaks and it makes noises. I don't know if, the mother's maybe hiding, cowering because the father has a brutal temper. I don't know what it means. But I don't know if it means both of those things or one of those things or something completely different. But he cares enough to get up early to get everything set up so the kid can go to church on Sunday. But that last line, look at it, the last lines, the last 5 lines. Speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? So he speaks indifferently, like, I don't care, to his dad, like a lot of kids do when they're young. They don't appreciate that their parents pay for everything. They don't appreciate that they care about him, I think. But the way he refers to him is him who had driven out the cold. It's almost like a classical, mythological explanation of the father. But look at those last 2 lines. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Austere means serious, stern. An office is a place where you go to work. So, it's 2 words you never really see compared or connected to talking about love. Maybe he's just discussing the fact that this old man never threw the ball with his kid. He never had the cats in the cradle type relationship. But as it turns out, he did the busy work. He got up, he busted his hump, he paid the bills, he made sure the water was running and the heat was on. That was how he showed his love. And the kid didn't appreciate it at the time. Maybe he would have rather gone out and played frisbee with his pop. But instead, the guy did the busy work of being a parent, taking care of business. I don't know. It's a poignant, very sad, poignant poem when you think about it. Think about the ennui that it elicits just from, winter Sundays alone. Now, remember that word synesthesia. Synestesia. It's you have one sense to describe another of the 5 senses. So it doesn't really blend. I don't know why I have this poem. It was written in the 1600s by a man named Sir Andrew Marvell. It's called To His Coy Mistress. It's a 3-part seduction poem. And if I was talking live in class, I'd get into some more detail, but it's kind of creepy to have this on tape. So as it turns out, I'll kind of skip over some stuff. But know this about this poem. The first part utilizes hyperbole, where the poet says all the stuff. He uses excessive exaggeration to describe what he would do if he were a Time Lord. If he had no constraints of the calendar, of the hourglass, of the clock, the watch. The second part is the Carpe Diem section of this poem. It begins with, and at my back, let me read it exactly, I don't want to screw it up. But at my back I always hear Time's winged chariot drawing near, hurrying near. Meaning, almost like a volta in a sonnet. Get away from the hyperbole, and it's all images of Carpe Diem. We got to act now, because if we don't, neither of us are going to want to, because we're going to be old, ugly, and or dead. The third part, the third section, is all about action. Things that, this is him describing what he wants to do. Coy, of course, meaning shy or, unwilling. Had we but whirled enough in time, this coyness lady were no crime. We would sit down and think which way to walk and pass our long love's day. Thou by the Indian Ganges side, should us rubies find, I by the tide of Humber would complain. I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. Meaning never. Jews will never convert. And if I find a ruby, it's not as beautiful as you. Throws it in the river. And again, had we but whirled enough in time, meaning if there were no constraints of space or of time, then we could play these games, because it wouldn't matter. We'd stay eternally youthful and lusty. In fact, he continues with the hyperbole, and I hate this line, man, I really do. My vegetable love should grow. Ugh. Faster than empires and more slow. 100 years to go to praise thine eyes, and on thy forehead gaze. 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest. An age at least to every other part, to every part. And the last age should show your heart. For lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. And when he says an age, he means like the Paleolithic era. He's talking about these giant spans of millions of years for each part of her body. Again, hyperbole is excessive exaggeration. But at my back I always hear Time's winged, not winged, winged chariot hurrying near. Meaning, we've got to move, because it's time. Time does exist. It is a thing. And yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. Meaning, I'm not going to do this once you're dead. These antics, these games won't exist in the marble vault, the tomb. This next line, it's not good. And then worms shall try that long preserved virginity, and your quaint honor turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. Poe does. Edgar Allan Poe does, as we'll see a little later, but he's not normal. He's a soup sandwich. So, as it turns out, I'm not going to go into detail again, but he doesn't get his chance, so worms shall try that long preserved virginity. You get what's going on here. You understand what he's trying to say. Now, and again, action, immediacy, instance. Now, therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires. This is we gotta act now. This is what we gotta do. Now let us sport us while we may, and now like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour, than languish in a slow chapped power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. I've always wondered if he meant the sun would be like, woo, because of their randiness and would like scurry away. But the let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball reminds me a little bit of Othello, where he uses the weird sexual innuendo of the beast with two backs. Anyway, again, without getting creepy, without getting bawdy, he's trying to seduce this young woman into the bed. And this is his three-pronged attack. Hyperbole, Carpe diem and immediacy, action. If you remember one line from this thing, that Volta, that the beginning of the Carpe Diem section where he says, "But at my back, I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near." If you ever get a chance down in Magnolia Cemetery on the Upper Peninsula of Charleston, there's a pyramid there. It's got a family buried within, and there's a hourglass at the top of the entrance with wings on it. Literally time flying. And that, whenever I read this poem, it reminds me of time's winged chariot hurrying near. But anyway, I know these poems, except for the Two by Frost, don't really connect. They don't really have a common theme. They're a little bit different. One thing to notice, this thing, the rhyme scheme is unique. Not unique, but each line rhymes with the next line, basically. And again, there's a couple examples that they're approximate rhymes where they're not really that close. But that was the way they did it back in those days. And depending on which edition you read of this poem, there's some words that are different. Like, I know I've seen morning dew. I've also seen morning glue in some editions or some transcriptions of this poem, because it comes from a time when the English language is still evolving, basically. From Old English to Middle English to the Elizabethans. I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to that, but I do know this. Sir Andrew Marvell, creepy. Anyway, I'm going to put the microphone down now, and if you have any questions, please ask them on D2L, and I would be honored to answer them. And this goes for any of the future or present poems that we talk about in lecture. If you have any questions, please ask. Thank you.